Welcome back to The Void, where today we're going to be talking about regret. Majority of these kids you're calling trans are going to grow out of it and they're going to regret it. Just look at the dissonance research. Not that closely. It's 80%. Are we really going to harm the vast majority just for the benefit of a tiny minority? This is an oversimplification of a key piece to the transphobia pie. The leveraging of potential regret against care for transgender people, most often minors, but in general as well. Oftentimes citing research that if I was a medical professional, I would say it has its place and in specific instances can be useful in the right context. But as a layperson dealing with other lay people's interpretations of it, I call fucking trash.
They completely grow out of thinking that they are trans if you just do nothing.
Experience gender dysphoria at a young age and then transition to become gay.
It's just like all of this one.
Here's a question. If it is a phase, if it is a trend, if it's something they're going to grow out of and regret eventually, why is it that like 98% of children who socially transition maintain their trans identity 5 years later? Why is it that upwards of 95% of people who go on hormone blockers go on hormone replacement therapy? Why is it that from hormone replacement therapy on, the detransition rate is like 2%? And why is it those people who do detransition oftentimes cite social motivations for it, not an internal changing of identity? Why is it that a lot of people who detransition go on to retransition, much more than people who detransition in the first place? Why is it that if people go on to get surgeries, like facial feminization and they have a regret rate of around 1%? When does the phase end exactly? At what point of care are we seeing this steep jump in regret rates? Are we playing by like repenting rules? So like if someone detransitions on their deathbed, then it was a phase, it just lasted the whole life. There's two ways, Western man. One is arguing that trans people just don't exist. So the healthcare is always harmful, regardless of pesky things like the opinions of those who receive it. And to people who would argue this first point, I'd like to let you know that there is only a little opening in my heart for the existence of God, and I leave it there for the potential of you burning in hell. The second point is to say, yeah, sure, there is some population of trans people, but it's smaller than the one we have today. There's been exponential growth, obviously due to the medical community scooping up people who are just gender nonconforming and pushing them into this healthcare. The main point being, number big now. That's scary. To this second group, I have great news. Medical professionals aren't as reckless as you think, and they've done some research into this number big phenomenon. And look, it's done by one of the co-authors of the dissonance studies you like, so we know they are not tainted by New Age woke gender ideology.
We suggest that gender dysphoria might be more common than previously thought, and the exponential increase in referrals is just a reflection thereof.
Dear God, they've been tainted by New Age woke gender ideology. To me, it seems like Steensma either agrees or agreed with Zucker, but just doesn't assume that he's right all the time. So when criticisms pop up, he takes the time to double check them. And it just so happens when he does the double checking, it seems to agree with the theory of affirmation. The options aren't affirmation or nothing, despite how people want to frame Zucker's watchful waiting as just doing nothing. It is a form of intervention, and they have to be responsible for the outcomes of that intervention being used instead of affirmation. Regret from affirmation seems remarkably low, and the earlier, the better. Did you know that people who have received hormone replacement in their teenage years show better mental health outcomes than those who receive it as an adult? How about the fact that when a trans child receives puberty blockers and therapy, they show better outcomes than trans children who are not put on puberty blockers and only receive therapy? Shout out to all those very bright boys who said Matt Walsh being an idiot didn't matter because puberty blockers are abuse. So there is some concern that refusing care would be harmful to these people. And in a paper briefly titled Attachment and Shame in Gender Nonconforming Children and Their Families Toward a Theoretical Framework for Evaluating Clinical Interventions, the question is asked, are Zucker's methods harmful? The approach isn't specific to trans children. It is in general more about the relationship between a gender atypical child and their parents. This relationship has been pretty well identified as substantially important to the well-being of LGBT people. It's about how negative feedback, when repeated on something that a child views as core to their identity, can imbue shame into themselves, which comes with a bevy of long-term mental health problems. Zucker's intervention comes in essentially 3 parts. One is psychotherapy for the child, basically a clinical refutation of their own sense of identity, going through it and explaining it away to them. The second is psychotherapy for the parents, which is involved in making sure that they don't support their child's identity, and therapy convincing them that they were wrong to do so in the first place. Part 3 is teaching the parents how to prevent the child from expressing in a cross-gender way. It is a keystone of Zucker's intervention to have the parents be policing the child's gender identity, risking this vital relationship by making the source of this refutation of the child's own identity come from the place that supports them. And it's actually worse than that, because I lied a little. Psychotherapy for the parents also includes looking for ways they trans their own child, which puts the parents at risk of developing a strong sense of shame as well. Also, he has to include that he sometimes has to tell people that, oh, he can make sure their child isn't a transsexual, but he can't make sure they're not gay, which is a thing that he mentioned explicitly. Gender affirmation has none of these problems because it does not pathologize gender atypical behavior. In fact, the main goal is maintaining the family support system while acknowledging the stressors on the parents and the child. Zucker's method, or just the running theory that minors shouldn't receive care if you don't want to blame Zucker, has the potential to harm trans children by refusing prompt care and imbuing them with a sense of shame, their parents by laying partial blame for the kid being trans on the parents, and cis children by giving them the same sense of shame that the trans children have. What a grenade that we're calling healthcare. Not only can it do harm to the person receiving the care, but fucking everyone involved. I get that research into trans healthcare is very limited at the moment. But the information we do have points to prompt, affirmative care being the way to go. Are we really going to risk harm to the majority for the benefit of the minority?
Okay, so the main thing I want you to take from this is that there are many different ways to measure regret and observe regret. And that it seems that when it comes to trans regret, the entire conversation is dominated by not actual instances of places where trans people regret the healthcare they have received, but in the potential for cis people to get the healthcare and regret it later. Some could say that's the whole point, that the whole reason that you see detransitioners get huge platforms when they want to talk about how terrible trans healthcare is because there is a large attempt to delegitimize the entire thing, regardless of how people actually feel when they receive care. I would personally just like to see an expansion of the discussion on regret and allow people to speak more candidly and in environments that they're not going to feel like if they say something negative about the healthcare they've received, it's going to be used as leverage against all of trans healthcare, as impossible of a task that is. And I'd also like detransitioners to be able to talk about anything without it being world news, apparently. You should be able to talk about testosterone making you go bald and you regretting it without you immediately becoming the face of detransition. There should also be the ability for these people to talk about not proceeding with care in a way that doesn't immediately become, oh, they didn't fully transition, therefore they were harmed. There are many ways for people to do like an a la carte version of transitioning in which they'll find themselves satisfied at any point along the way. And there are people who will go like even all the way to hormone replacement and decide they don't want to do it, but not view the whole process as negative. Majority of this healthcare is semi-reversible, at least. People can do it for a period of time and decide they don't want to do it anymore, and then just move on with their lives. Like everything else involving trans people, the knowledge base seems narrow at this point when it comes to regret and detransition, and there should be active measures to expand that basis, which seems to be a terrible point that we're at with trans healthcare, is that there's several camps of disagreeing perspectives on what should be basic information. Anyway, shouldn't take this long for my next video to come out. Sorry for the delay. This is actually the third type of video I was going to make, and I'm still not the most happy with it. But I decided to cut the losses, put it out, move forward.